we often find that keeping up your morale, sometimes, you fail one, um, and you kind of get your morale down. Can each of you walk through an experience? I think maybe all of you had one. I know I did. How did you? Maybe we'll start with you, Stephanie. Your mic is still live here. What are some suggestions for keeping your morale up during the process, and how do you maybe deal with failing an exam?
Yeah, I would say just if you can have like your own self-reward system in place, whatever you love to do, make sure you get to reward yourself with that. Whether it's, you want to go buy a new pair of shoes every time you pass an exam, or if you're into video games, go play a new game or buy one, really reward yourself for going through the process. And I know after, I believe mine was BDCS, was just, my brain was done after that exam. It was really tough, and I would just go drive to the nearest Sonic and get myself a nice Oreo milkshake and let things,
Awesome.
work out after I had my milkshake.
That's awesome. Ivan, how about you?
Yeah, I think failure is just a part of growing for me. So although like I would say like when I was younger, I had like more of a fear of it, but I'm not really afraid of it anymore because you kind of learn from it. So on the exam that I failed, basically you know, they're tricky. Like when you fail, like then they tell you, oh yeah, you did excellent on these things and you failed the vignette or whatever. So once they did that, like you use it as a learning tool. This is where I need to focus my efforts, right? Um, I'm good on the multiple choice, and let me just practice this more and realize that I can't start a vignette over because I think I did something wrong. It's really like using it as that teaching tool in that teachable moment, and allow yourself to feel what you feel. Like just because we're in this culture now where we kind of celebrate failure doesn't mean that failure is necessarily all good. Allow yourself to feel what you feel, be sad about it, beat yourself up about it, but use that as a motivation tool. Get back up and try it again, and learn from it.
Awesome. So learning tool, I think of the exam as a learning tool. Mike talks about that a lot. The idea that actually probably the best way to study for the exam is to just take it. So if you sort of take that mindset that by going through the experience of taking the exam, maybe you'll pass, and if you don't, well, you just went through the best experience in preparing to pass the exam. So I feel like that's sometimes kind of useful. So that's great, Ivan. Anne, how about you?
Yeah, so I was studying and taking my exams long distance. My best friend from graduate school and undergrad, she's in Minneapolis. We started taking our exams at the same time, and she passed every single one. She didn't fail a single one. I failed 3. And every time that she would pass and I would fail, I felt awful. But knowing myself going into the process, I knew that I would let my own thoughts dictate my future. So for example, I failed CDS. And that was my first one. I knew that if I failed that first one, I would dwell on the fact that this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm not cut out for this. So I scheduled my next exam the night before I took CDS. So that was ultimately that was my fail-proof system to prevent failure from dictating my future. And it really was just a matter of, I felt terrible for the weekend or the few days after, but then I realized, okay, we have 3 weeks till the next one. So it's time to move on, and there's no dilly-dallying and feeling sorry about it. So that's how I did it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I bet that after you did that, it started to take pressure off of you a little bit as you kind of went along. Whereas probably in the beginning, you're like, oh man, I don't know. I'm going to schedule this exam. I really don't know. But by the time you got to the third or the fourth one, you're like, yeah, whatever. I'm scheduling it. That's what I normally do.
Yep, exactly.
That's awesome. All right. Really good, guys. Anyone have any other? This is one of my favorite questions, and I know it's not written here, but Stephanie said Oreo milkshake is her favorite kind of reward. Ivan, I'd love to know what your favorite reward was for yourself as you went through the process.
Oh man. So I guess I am rewarded by like passing it. So I didn't like treat myself because that meant if I failed something, I wouldn't treat myself. I'd be punishing myself. So I didn't take that approach at all.
Mm-hmm.
I rewarded myself for studying. And in the question about studying, that's kind of what I was talking about. Like I would just sit down and play like FIFA all day and just like win the World Cup like 4 times or something. Like just like some mindless activity, which is totally irresponsible. But again, like I'm rewarding myself for actually doing the work before the exam and not necessarily dictating, my reward on whether or not I pass.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay. Anne, how about you?
Yeah, I was similar. I didn't celebrate afterwards or after I got the results, but I always, the day of the exam, I would go to a Panera next to the testing center and I would eat a sugar cookie, and it changed every month. But it was very specific. They're iced sugar cookies, which are delicious, and that's the only time I would eat them. And then I would take my exam usually from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. or something, and I would go home and I would sleep the rest of the day because napping is one of my favorite things ever. So similar to video games, but I would eat sugar cookies and take naps, and it all happened. It all happened the day that I studied and took the exam, not after I got my verdict, so to speak.
Yeah.
Did anyone else wear the same clothes every exam? Like
No.
I had such a ritual. I wore the exact same sweater, jeans, like everything, the exact same. So I knew I was comfortable in that, and I didn't change it. So I would just wear it every time. They knew me at first.
Yeah.
Ivan, I did the same thing. After I failed my first exam, I happened to pass it the next time, and that became my lucky shirt once I, passed that retake. So it was same shirt every time.
Yeah, they're like, "You're the guy in the blue sweater. You're taking the ARE." I was like, "Yep."
That's awesome. So I think we need to rename this this episode here: milkshakes, cookies, naps, video games, and lucky shirts, or something like that, and sweatbands. I guess that's another one.
Sweatbands, yeah, that's important.
Awesome.